Hi, friends. Do you ever feel like you're triggered in your romantic relationship? Triggered in a way that causes fights and wonder, how do we stop the fighting? In this video, we're going to talk about how to stop the fighting and how to recover afterward. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're returning, welcome back. My name is Raquel Perez, and I am a licensed professional counselor candidate in the state of Colorado. This is where I share mental health content with a twist as I share my own lived experiences and the way that my body and mind make sense of the information. With that, let's go ahead and get started. It's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it is a very hot summer day. My girlfriend and I are in the car, and we have been driving for the past 3 to 3.5 hours without air conditioning. And we've been stuck in traffic for the past hour. We are in desperate need to get out of the 95-degree heat and get into a pool. We've been looking forward to going to this very specific location in this town that we're in. We're excited to see the new activities, the slides, the pool, the hot springs. We're just super excited. And so in our haste, we look up some discount tickets from our hotel room, and we figure, great. We are not only going to this pool that we've been looking forward to, but we're getting it at a discounted rate. Hastily, we order the tickets, put the information on our GPS, jump in the car, and head off to our pool's destination. As we pull up to the destination, my girlfriend turns and looks at the building and she says, "This isn't it. This is the wrong place." I can hear the irritation in her voice, and that irritation starts to stir something up inside of me. And I begin to get pretty defensive. And I think, well, it's not my fault that we're at the wrong location. We both looked up where it was that we were going, and we both thought that this was where we should get our tickets and head to. She then says, "See, this is why I needed your help when I was purchasing the tickets." And I can hear the frustration begin to mount in her voice. And the voices in my head just start going. And I start thinking, okay, yeah, so this is my fault. This is my fault that now we're at the wrong location. I can't seem to do anything right. All of this is happening in my head. And then it morphs into, this is the second time today that something goes wrong in our day, and it becomes my fault. I can't handle this, and I start to think, something is different here. Something is different. She must not really care about me anymore. And I voice that. In my anger, in my frustration, I bite back and I say, "You just don't care about me anymore the way that you used to." And she turns and she looks at me and she says, I can't hear that anymore. I'm so sick and tired of hearing that." As I heard those words leave her mouth, it was like a punch in my stomach. I couldn't believe that she was saying this. Where I was in my frustration, in my anger, in my hurt, the words that she chose to say was not what I needed to hear. I dig deeper into my anger, and everything I do from there is fueled by my anger. And we start to have a verbal fight. She's now responding to my anger. I'm responding to her anger and her frustration, and things just escalate and escalate and escalate. We finally go into the building and we're separate. We can't seem to mend and come together. We're both really dug into our anger and our frustration. And I notice that throughout the afternoon, as most of the afternoon we spend apart, I come over to her, and every time that I come over to her, I just want to be noticed. I want to be heard. And the way that I start doing this is by pushing her buttons. And I noticed the second time I come over to her that all I'm doing is pushing these buttons. And I think I can't keep going and pushing the buttons. It's going to escalate everything. I don't know how I had the wherewithal to do that because it's not typically in my nature. I typically really want to be close to my partner when we're having an argument. And I want to be seen and heard and validated. And the way that I do that is by pushing buttons, because at the end of the day, it feels like negative interactions are interactions nonetheless. But I am able to understand what is happening inside of me. So I back off, I back away, and I spend the majority of our afternoon completely separate from her. And I allow all of the emotions to really bubble up to the surface. And I just let myself be in my emotions. I'm hurt, I'm sad, I'm frustrated, and I cry. And I cry for most of the afternoon because it's not what I had in mind. And it feels like my entire afternoon is now being ruined, and I feel so lonely. And I can't shake her into seeing me and validating me and my experience. At some point in the afternoon, we're able to come back together and spend a couple of hours of that time together. We both intentionally ignore the fight, the blow up that we just had in the parking lot a few hours earlier, just to be together. And I think, at least from my perspective, this was a very conscious decision. I wanted to salvage what was left of the afternoon. So we're able to come together and have a peaceful rest of our afternoon and rest of our evening. It wasn't easy, and it definitely felt very heavy. The next day, when we're driving back to town, when we're driving back home, at some point, I feel like the heaviness has lifted a little, and I start to talk about what happened the previous day and that afternoon. And we're both able to say what it was that we were holding on to and what it was from our own perspectives that led to the blow up that we had. It was a very brief conversation, and I thought, whoa, there's nothing in me that feels like it needs to draw out this conversation. I feel heard, I feel validated, and I feel seen. And I can tell that she does too. And then there's just a calmness that happens, and it's left there. There are a few things that in hindsight, I look back and I realize what was happening, what needed to happen, and the way that we were able to do that. In hindsight, when I started to piece together all of this information, I realized that neither of us, in our frustration and our anger, were able to sit in this space with empathy and compassion. Neither one of us were able to do that. What we really needed was time and space from each other to process what it is that had happened. I found that, again, when I was reaching out to her in the heat of the moment, I was reverting to my default, which is poking buttons just to be noticed and to be heard. But that, in the heat of the moment, was escalating the situation. Now, once I was able to realize what I was doing and how I was pushing the buttons, it really did take everything out of me to pull myself away from the situation, to pull myself away, and to allow myself to feel everything that was coming up from inside of me, and to allow myself to just feel and be in the moment and allow my body to do what it needed to do. And at that moment, it was cry and be away from the situation so that we could stop escalating it. Once we gave ourselves the time and the space that we needed, we came to a place where we were ready to at least sit together, but we weren't ready to start to process and see what it is that had happened. So we both made a very conscious decision to not revisit the situation before we were ready to do so. Once it felt like the heaviness of the situation had lifted, I felt like maybe it was a good place to revisit what had happened, as neither one of us really like ignoring indefinitely these blow-ups that happen. We both really tried to understand what it is that happened and why it happened. We were both able to speak our piece in a moment that we could lend empathy and compassion to the other to really understand where it is that they were coming from at the heat of the moment. But again, this didn't happen until the next day, which again is something that's very difficult for me to do, to sit with all of this for an entire 12-hour period. But I found something inside of me to be able to do this. Now, there's absolutely no way that I could have done all of that processing in real time. I really had to let the situation unfold. I really had to dip inside of myself to realize what it is, how it was that I was showing up in that moment, and to pull myself away from the negative way that I was showing up in that moment. It really was, in hindsight, as I days later reflected on the blow up that had happened, the way that we were able to pull away in a gentle-ish way, and the way that we were able to come back together in the end and address what had happened. With this, I encourage you to find ways to sit with information in hindsight so that you can understand and learn how it is that you're showing up in those fights in the heat of the moment, and what it is that you can do to pull yourself away, and how it is that you and your partner can come back together to understand the information and to move forward from there. Well, friends, that's all I have for this video. If you have found it useful, please hit that like button down below. If you're interested in getting more content on a weekly basis, please subscribe. I will also be posting a meditation video next week, so look for that. The title of that meditation is Meditation Talking to Connect with Your Partner. Well, until next time, bye for now.